Okay, let's find out what's happening on the global and local markets. Locally, Gunther, I would think that the PMI number, which was relatively lower, had some play on the markets.
That's a strange one, Devon. Rather than push the market into negative, we are in positive territory on the oil share here in Johannesburg. And we've got the UK higher as well, so maybe we're following them. But they are rising on the back of stronger banks, because the Bank of England has released results of its latest stress tests, and the banks passing there with flying colours. Apart from one or two, some rather big ones, failing certain elements, but it's not as if they can't fix it. So the market is happy. For Germany and France, it's a different story. They are being affected negatively by Eurozone PMI numbers, which came in smack bang on expectations and gave the euro a slight lift, which is not exactly what they want. And so people are now looking forward to the ECB tomorrow to announce whether or not they'll print more money. We've got oil. Yeah, this is a bit of a curious one. The oil price is still at lofty levels, and well, it's come down slightly this morning, but it's been strong overnight, remains lofty, and this is ahead of an OPEC meeting. Now, we all know that OPEC is looking to push production as much as possible in order to maintain, firstly, market share, and hopefully push some other producers out of the market, and thereby gaining more market share. You know that as soon as OPEC decides to close a tap, there's someone else on the other side waiting to open theirs. So a cut in production is most likely not going to be announced at this OPEC meeting. And one even wonders whether they'll keep it steady, but the oil price is rising. So we can put a question mark on that one. Let's take a look at our indicators. The FTSE is, higher by 0.4%. The CAC and the DAX are both down, the former by a third, latter by 0.25%. Joburg, Aussie, 0.1 in the black. Industrials and financials down by the same margin. And resources have gained 2.7%. Gold miners are up by the same, with platinum mining down by 2.25%. It's 1,068 per ounce on gold, 840 on platinum. And the oil price, 43 we have there on the board, is 43.10 in reality. 14 Rand 41 for a dollar, 21.75 for a pound, 15 Rand 26 for 1 euro. Then how much will you pay for a rand from the BRICS? A rupee slightly weaker against the rand. All right, we're speaking to Gary Boyson from Rand Swiss. So let's find out what he has to say. Gary, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here.
Let's start off with Sasol and Zalo. It's our second BE listing. I'm a bit concerned because it seems we're creating an alternative market, and we're going to end up with two prices for the same company.
Yeah, I think how you've got to look at it. I mean, remember these at least BE empowerment listings on the JSE have really come as in the backdrop to the FSB tightening up regulations on the OTC platforms, so the over-the-counter platforms. And what happened there was they basically looked at these over-the-counter platforms and said you need to be licensed as exchanges. So some of them, for example, MTN Zakhele, decided instead of applying for an exchange license and almost fragmenting the market and creating multiple exchanges, it would rather go and list on the JSE instead. Sasol is the second one. Now there are still I think it's A4X and ZARX that could still be new exchanges coming to the market. Because at the moment, I mean, the JSE essentially has a monopoly. So I think just the noises that there could be new exchanges coming would be a very good thing for investors, because it'll bring down transaction costs, as competition would.
Let's talk about that for a moment. Do you think that competition will actually survive in this market? Because at the end of the day, the JSE has the biggest companies, and it's unlikely they'll move.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex debate, and probably too long to discuss on this show. But if you look at it, the health of a market really is the volume of trade that goes through it. So it does make sense that there is essentially a monopoly. That said, I mean, a lot of people are critical of the JSE's prices when compared to some of the international exchanges. Now, also, I mean, if you speak to the JSE, for example, they'll also say that there's already competition. I mean, investors also have the opportunity to go offshore. They compete with international exchanges for a slice of the shareholders' wallet. So it is a very complex issue, whether you should have new exchanges or not. But in the end of the day, I guess market forces will determine whether these exchanges can survive.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk about Standard Bank. Well, first bad news out of the UK, now out of Malawi, I think it is. Tanzania,
yes. So yeah, this is actually, I mean, it's actually the Standard Bank's UK arm that's being fined, and it's a corruption scandal, a bribery scandal, and it's got to do with one of the deals that they were doing. They increased the deal fee by, I think it's just over 1%, and then rebated that percent to one of the parties. So this really it's the first case in the UK for the Serious Fraud Office, and it's really a landmark case that's probably from my point of view, I think it's going to help, almost encourage whistleblowing from companies. So instead of going through like a corruption sort of scandal, you admit to the offence and pay the fine.
So a bit like a competition commission.
A bit like a competition commission, and it's something that is very prevalent in the US, for example, but really not very done in the UK. So this being the first sort of judgment in the UK of this kind.
Well, it's about time, because at the end of the day, to be corrupted, you need to find a corruptor. Lonman. This morning, Sen's announcement, big buyer for that one. But obviously they think, well, there's got some legs to run, but now I'm worried about others. Kumba, yeah, let's see. Kumba, 80% down this year. Same as Lonman, and we said Lonman is priced for bankruptcy, so question marks around Kumba and others like it.
No, if you look at it, all of the commodity counters have been hit particularly hard. I think if you look at the diversifieds, for example, Billiton's probably the one that's fallen the least, and it's still down massively over the last, say, 3-4 years. Whether these are priced for bankruptcy, I think what you're looking at the resource sector, you've got, on the ground, you've got physical projects that are being invested in by these companies. They're long-term projects, and these companies are very hesitant to take that supply out of the market. At the same time, shareholders can sort of see the writing on the wall, and you can see that there's just too much supply in a world that just doesn't quite have the same demand, especially with changing technology, and they're voting with their feet and selling the stocks. Whether this is the bottom and everyone keeps on asking it, my feeling is not yet. You have to see some of these companies going out of business. You have to see companies failing so that production comes out of the market, so commodity prices can normalize.
Okay, so we have to wait for that one then. What about Sasol? This Mozambique pipeline extension, is that a reason enough to buy Sasol? The other day I heard them say that gas is the future.
Yeah, I mean, remember, Sasol's an interesting company. Unfortunately for traders, Sasol pretty much tracks the oil price. I mean, if you do an overlay and you sort of take out a little bit of the currency component as well, there's a huge correlation between the two, or at least a very high correlation. So, I mean, this also, if you look at the size of the project, it's not massive in terms of Sasol's overall market cap. I think it's around 1% of its market cap, so not particularly big. But again, I mean, if you're looking at it as a long-term investor in Sasol, I think there's a lot of opportunities because of the technology that Sasol holds. And Sasol's not just an oil company. And I've always wondered why the market treats it exactly like an oil company. I think only 40% of its revenue comes from oil. So it's these days it's a diversified chemicals company. And I think maybe the market pricing it a little bit unfairly at the moment.
Maybe it's a gluk effect. The Rand. We've got it close to record lows. We've got the Fed coming up, etc., etc. And we keep talking it down now. Are we not creating a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah, I think the Rand under a little bit of pressure. I mean, obviously we had the rate hike, which I think stemmed the worst of the flows, but I think the Rand really coming under pressure ahead of the ratings agency's announcements on Friday. So S&P is widely expected to downgrade us from BBB to BBB-, which puts us one notch above junk and really brings S&P in line with Moody's and Fitch. Then Fitch is also going to report, but they've got a stable outlook on the local economy, and that's expected to be downgraded to negative. So I think there's a lot of room. I mean, I think the Rand is pricing in those downgrades, and if there's any sort of surprise on Friday, I think you will see a little bit of a firming in the local currency.
Thanks for your time, Gary.